So, fair fight for change. It simply begins with, can we sit down and engage on the same side? It's always you and me against the issue. We are never against each other. The moment we choose to share our lives with another person, we are forever on the same team. There are going to be challenges and all kinds of other things, but if there's an enemy, it's the challenges. It's not the person. So first of all, we start with inviting. You wouldn't want to start this process when you got company coming over. It's much better to say, hey, can we do that Sunday afternoon? Or, come up with a time. And when people know there's commitment and there's emotional, we're in the emotional adult place, generally it doesn't have to be right now. So we invite the other person and we create a time and a space to do this when we can be available. And then the person with the concern is going to spend, some moments reflecting. And what is it? Because sometimes when we reflect a little more deeply on something, we realize that on the surface it may look like one thing, but beneath the surface it's something else. So we reflect on the concern, and once we're really clear of what that concern is, we say it. My concern is that, we're not having dinner together very often. Or my concern is you made a decision about purchasing something without talking to me about it first. Or my concern, whatever it is. You want to be able to say it specifically, clearly, on just one issue. It can be tempting when we have someone's attention to bring up everything. But that's not a good formula for success. We want to start with one issue. If we can take one issue and work through it, we can take another issue and work through it. But we don't want to throw everything out there. So once we've stated it clearly and specifically, that's number 3. The other person, as we've practiced in other exercises, just repeats it back. They're not going to say, I agree, or I see it the same way, or because you brought that up, I'm going to bring this up. They're just going to say, yeah, here's what I'm hearing you say. And when you're sure that what you intended and what they're hearing is the same, we're going to show some appreciation for being heard. And only then do we say, here's what I'm asking for. I'm asking that before you spend X amount of money, that we have a conversation. Or I'm asking that, that 3 nights a week, that we make a commitment to having dinner together. Or that 1 weekend a month is just ours, or whatever we have to do to arrange that 1 weekend a month is just ours, that we do. Or that 2 nights a week you get up with the baby. Or that within 6 months we have a plan for how we're going to live near each other. And that we make a commitment to create that and to honor that. So you want to ask clearly where there's no room for misunderstanding. And you want to make sure that what you're asking for is really what you want. It might be tempting, especially for people who tend to placate, to ask for something that's maybe a little bit different than what they want. So you want to ask for what you want, because this is a negotiation. But it's not going to be very effective if you don't start with, here's what I'm asking for. And that should be so clear that if you said to a group of 40 people, here's what I asked for, everybody would understand. So it's not something like, be nicer to my mother when she calls. It isn't. It's not something like, I want you to care. You don't really ask people for a feeling. You're going to ask for a behavior. And then the other person's going to repeat back what they heard. There's some appreciation. And then they're going to have a chance to think about it. Can I do that? Is that something I could do? Is it something I want to do? Is it something I'm comfortable doing? And if the answer to that is yes, they can say yes. I can do it. If the answer is no, I can't do it, they can say no, I can't do it. What more often than not is the response is, here's what I might need from you in order to be able to do what you're asking for. Or here's a counter proposal that would help us move towards what you're looking for. And with goodwill, with people who are committed and open to change and communicating and caring about each other, with that umbrella open, wide and strong, most things can be worked through. So when that back and forth can go on, I've seen it go on for hours and sometimes minutes. It goes on until you get to a point where you either reach an agreement or realize you're not going to reach an agreement. And most of the time people work out something. If they don't, they don't. So we're going to practice it in class. We practice with coaches. And I still remember every coach I ever had that helped me through this process is still sitting on my shoulder. Whether it's Hal telling me, as I said yesterday, there's 1,000 ways you could have said it, and you picked the worst one. Or Brian, who said, Seth, that sounded like sarcasm to me. What do you think? They're still there with me, even though that was just a couple minutes of time. So we internalize our coaches. Ultimately, we become our own coaches, but we do it in class with real coaches because that can help us become aware of things that we might not have been aware of. And since we know we all have good intentions, those coaches, also knowing that, can help us see things we might not have otherwise seen. So we continue until a solution. And what we're looking for in the fair fight is facial expression. I mentioned yesterday that if the face says one thing and the words say something different, the face wins every time. So is the facial expression open, responsive, reflective, interested, and real, or not? If it's closed, guarded, masked, showing a sense of disinterest, it doesn't matter what the words are. It doesn't even matter if we're holding hands and sitting in the leveling position. That face is communicating an awful lot of information. Is the focus on the here and now? I don't know anybody who doesn't have moments from the past that they might think back and say, it would have been nice if something different happened. If I had said something different, or maybe done something different. And that's a natural part of being a work in progress. We all have that. But I also don't know anybody with a magic wand who can change what's already happened. What's happened has happened. We can spend the rest of our life talking about things that are already done and happened. And it's not going to change it one bit. It might change our understanding of it. It's not going to change the event. So we want to make sure the focus is on the here and now, direct, specific to the problem, one issue and to the point. If we find that it's all about stuff that we can't do anything about, then that's a whole different experience. We want to make sure communication is clear and relevant. That we're not exaggerating, that we're not lacking in empathy, and that we're not being inaccurate. That it's realistic, accurate, and authentic, as opposed to exaggerating. And generally, if you hear someone saying someone always this or never that, right away the person's thinking about, well, last Tuesday I did. Or you remember a year ago, in the spring I didn't. So we want to avoid, generalizations like always and never. We want to make sure that the comments and impact are reasonable, fair, and above the belt. Above the belt there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But we each have those points that if someone touches on it, could be very hurtful. For some people it might be, taking God's name in vain. For someone else it might be bringing up something from the past that we agreed to never bring up again. For someone else it might be using certain language. But if we know that there's something that our partner would experience as sort of being hit below the belt, that's likely to trigger them, and we're doing that anyway, you really got to ask yourself, is there goodwill there? What's going on? Are we somehow seeing this person as the enemy? What's going on that would have us doing something that would be the equivalent of hitting somebody below the belt? And we generally know each other well enough to have a sense of what that looks like with the people we're closest to. And if you find that the person you're dealing with this does something that you experience as being below the belt, you want to let them know that, in case they don't know. We want to make sure that we're all willing to take responsibility. We are in this together. When people really own that we're works in progress, that we are human, that just no different than LeBron, we don't make every free throw or every layup, or any superstar. The best of the best have bad days. So, of course we do. And when we really accept and embrace that that's okay, then it's much more likely that we can recognize our own contribution and find ourselves willing and open to change. That's part of what we're looking for as we evaluate how a fair fight's going in the process. So at the end of the fair fight, you'll see that right at the bottom is the issue of did we resolve it or make progress towards a solution. In work, often the whole focus is on how we resolve something. Because, it's about, did we hit the target, did we get the job done, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to the mission of intimacy and bonding and our closest love relationships, it's so much more about how we get there than where we get. And it's important to recognize that different process for a very different aspect of our lives. So we're going to be looking to see if at the end of this process, we want to make sure that we feel more important to each other and not less. It doesn't, whether or not we've worked out an agreement, whether or not the agreement's exactly what somebody might have wanted or asked for, if the process ends with one person feeling less important, that's not a good outcome. We want to make sure that we have handled this in a way where we both recognize that we have influence, and that there's a boost to our self-worth and the value we feel in the relationship, and not the opposite. That any sense of resentment, that there's a sense of relief from feelings of resentment instead of the opposite. That hurt and fear have decreased, that there's greater trust in the relationship, that there's more closeness, that we've made progress towards mending hurt feelings, and that we also have made progress or actually been able to forgive the other person. You can't tell somebody to forgive somebody or not to forgive somebody, but that's a sign of a positive outcome. We're going to demonstrate one. Is that all right with both of you?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so pick your focus.
He's so lost in
Okay.